Welcome to Huddle Up with Matias Bueno. Today, all the way from Oakville, Ontario, we have a very special guest, Juan Morales, who is a NHL video social media creative, has joined us here today, and he's going to talk about his journey as someone that makes videos, crashes his computer trying to open Premiere Pro with 5 terabytes of 4K footage, and all the great goodies that go into the mountaintop that it takes for you to climb all the way from the bottom to the top to become a creator. So Juan, it is with a great pleasure that I welcome you to the show. Thanks for coming on, brother.
I appreciate you having me on, and that whole thing about your Premiere Pro crashing is completely accurate. It actually happened maybe about an hour ago. So you're completely right on that. But no, thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat, and yeah, just down to talk shop and whatnot. So let's get to it.
So as we were talking about a little bit before recording here, one of the things I think that's a big misconception with creators, especially when it comes to the video editing space, that is one in more recent years that has become better than ever with more access to technology. I've been guilty of this myself. When people see your work, and your work is phenomenal, by the way, and it's not, I'm not even trying to boast, like your work is amazing. When people see the work that you've done, they would look at it and say, Juan, how the hell did you do that? That seems impossible. That's so amazing. Bro, you're so great. You're phenomenal. You're this and that and the other. And then you're sitting there on the other side probably thinking, oh yeah, sure. But like we said before, you're just a guy like who's trying to, you spawned in the province of Ontario. God didn't make it easy on you. And now you have to find a way.
I would have spawned in Colombia. Correction. I just happened to move to Ontario, but I love the way you put that.
Oh, there you go. So maybe life would have been a bit of a different, RPG journey, but you spawned in Ontario and were given the task, survive, find a way to make money in the highest pressure industry possible in all of Canada, in the place where there's the most people doing it. How have you done it? What have been some of the things, what have been some of the important elements that you've learned along your journey that helped you with starting and that you still hold true to yourself today? I know that's maybe a bit of a loaded question, but
yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to tackle that. Well, to kind of the first thing you said, it's like we talked about this a little bit before, but just to kind of give it a different example, like I was saying, like my video stuff, like what I do per se, it's like you making this podcast. I'm looking at what you do. I've listened to your episodes before this, and I'm thinking like, how the hell does this guy produce, plan, and edit all this? It's the same thing, right? It's just like it's like looking at a chef making a plate. I don't know how to you know what goes into it, but you don't know how to actually cook it. So when you get the dish, you're like, oh, this is awesome. Like you're so good at this. But to them, it's just a muscle reflex, right? Like for me, like I've just been doing this now for 4 or 5 years, where making these videos comes kind of naturally to me. So like you kind of just said, I'm a normal guy. I'm just good with a computer and with a camera to a degree. But to kind of answer your main question there, and to kind of like start off, it's like how sorry, what was the main question at the end there? I didn't mean to.
Oh yeah, no worries. It's there's a lot that goes into this, but so the main question is, what are some of the main things that you learned in the beginning of your journey that you still hold true to yourself to this day? Like the basic cliches that still like they stand the test of time.
I think like this is the most, if you want a cliche, the most cliche thing I could tell you is that anything is possible. And like, I know that is like the most used cliche in the history of cliches, but like when I think about it now, like we're in 2021, 5 years ago, I was starting at university. I even maybe a little bit further back, like 6 years ago, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And like, when I started at Ryerson to do the sport media thing, and when I went into school and started learning all this stuff, like I didn't know what I wanted to do. But, I think one thing I've always just kind of believed in is the fact that like, whatever you put your mind to, again, another cliche, whatever you put your mind to, you can achieve. Like, if you would have told me 5 years ago in my first year of university that I was going to be working with the NHL or having worked with MLSC or all these things I've done, I would have called you crazy. I would have never believed it. But like, I think I like at the end of the day, like I think I've always just kind of believed in the thought of like, no matter what you want, you can achieve. You just need to put in the work. And I think that's the thing that's propelled me, is just kind of being able to put my nose to the ground and work hard and get to where I want to be by just grinding it out. You know what I mean? Like there's also another cliche there, like that cliche of like that grind mentality, but like that's just kind of one thing. It's like if it's out there, someone's already doing that job, why can't I do it myself? So I think that's the biggest thing from the start of my journey as a content creator, as a sports creative, is just whatever goal you have in mind. And this goes for anything, right? Like if you're an artist, if you're an athlete, like whatever the hell you want to do, like the goal is achievable. You just need to understand that you have to put in the work to get there, and you have to be willing to make sacrifices and be willing to put in the work when necessarily and be willing to talk to the right people. You know what I mean? It's a mix of all things. But yeah, if I had to narrow it down, it's just the biggest thing is anything is possible. Like you can literally achieve whatever you want as long as you're willing to work for it. And you also have to understand, like, especially in our industry, like the biggest thing is like this isn't an easy industry to break into. Like this isn't just going to be handed to you on a silver platter, right? Like, and I don't even think just sports. I think content creation in general, podcasting, graphic design, like whatever. Like it's the world of content is it's easy to get into. It's hard to like grow in it because there's so many people. So I think it's just understanding that anything is possible, but you're gonna have to work really hard, and you're gonna have to also make sure that you're gonna work harder than a lot of other people, because this is an industry where there's always someone looking to kind of do what you're doing. And yeah, there's a lot of things. Like I said, like you said, it's a pretty loaded question, but that's kind of the main thing I would say is kind of helped me propel, is just kind of that belief that like whatever I want to achieve is possible. I just need to figure out, you got to find that road that takes you there and be ready to take it no matter what happens.
I know that there's a lot of cliche answers for those that are in the sports industry, looking to be in the sports industry or were in the past. When it comes to the question, what made you want to be in sports media? What made you take the program at Ryerson? And I'm sure, a lot of people always say, well, I love sports, I love watching it, but was there anything specific or unique about the program that you saw potential in before you entered?
Like I'll give you some context because I kind of touched on it before I answer your question. I actually originally, like I said, if you met me 6 years ago, right, like way before I even entered university, I probably didn't have a slightest clue that I'd be in sport media. I think the obvious answer is yeah, like I've played sports my whole life. I love sports. I grew up watching sports. They've always been a passion of mine. But I think before I got to university, when I was applying for schools, like I actually wanted to get into kinesiology originally. I wasn't even thinking about the media stuff. I never touched the camera. I'd never done Photoshop. And I think my whole thing before entering university was just like, there comes a time in everyone's life, and if you played sports, you probably know, like there comes a time where you just know you cannot take it professionally. I know I just said everything's not possible, but like there's a degree to certain things where, like, if you're not born a natural talented athlete, it's gonna be extremely difficult to get to that pro level. So obviously in high school, they came to a point where like, okay, I'm not going to turn pro in hockey or rugby, which were the two sports I played at the time. So how can I stay involved in sports beyond just being on the field? And originally my kind of thought process was, maybe I could help athletes recover. And I was always interested in kinesiology and how the body works and stuff like that. And then, I also back in the day had an interest I was really passionate about writing. Used to write short stories when I was a kid. I had a little bit of a blog growing up, like in high school, for hockey, because that was my favorite sport at the time. It still is. But, with that passion, I was just also researching journalism programs on the side. It was never really like, I want to do this. It's like, I'm just kind of curious to see what's out there. And as you kind of alluded to, the Ryerson Sport Media program was open at the time. It was like the third year the program was open, because I think it started, I would have started school, it started in 2017. That was the third class. But I ended up just kind of applying for it on a whim, because that's when I kind of hit a fork in the road, in this metaphorical road, where it was like, I can either help these athletes recover and improve at their sport from the kinesiology perspective, but I also, as a writer, I loved telling stories, and that's what keeps me here. And I know I say I'm a content creator and I'm a content producer or videographer, whatever you want to call me. If people ask me what I do, I'm a storyteller. I love telling stories. So it was either, do I help the athletes improve and get better from the physical side, or do I tell their stories, and do I connect them in a different way and help them amplify their voices. So I applied to the sport media program on a whim, and I didn't expect to get in. And I still remember waking up one morning and seeing the acceptance emails and losing my mind, because at the time, like 60 people got in, and it was really tight. There was a lot, like a bit of a ladder you have to climb to get in. So at first I wasn't really sure. And then I kind of just, it's something I've always carried with me. And this kind of adds into your first question. It's like, something I've always carried with me is taking a risk is better than not taking a risk at all. And so like at the time, like little fucking, sorry, I don't know if I
No, it's all good. It's all
swear.
good, man. It's all good, man. It's all good. We're all real here.
Little
so
like
no worries.
17, 18-year-old, like pre-university Juan was like, oh, like kinesiology is like the safe option. Like there's always going to be jobs out there. Like I don't know so much about sport media, you know what I mean? And that was also 6 years ago when content creation didn't exist. You can probably start seeing how the building blocks of where I got to kind of lead into. But I ended up just jumping, taking the leap of faith and taking the sport media, kind of just assuming, you know what, only so many people get into this program. It's brand new. Like, I don't know, but maybe it's a good chance. So I ended up just taking the leap of faith into the program, and from day one, like it was a whole new experience. I came in there like a deer in headlights, man. Like I was a writer, and like there was a very large contingent of the program like that was also like me, like had very little experience, didn't really know what we wanted to do. But then there were also people who were very experienced, having done volunteer stuff with Rogers TV or were graphic designers and all this stuff. And I'm like, I am way out of my element here. But that's kind of just how that journey started, and the rest was kind of history. You know what I mean? I think and to kind of answer another part of your question, I think what kind of attracted me to the program and to the opportunity in the first place was just to not just be able to go to school in Toronto and experience, a big city environment and something it is a very different university compared to others, but I think also just the opportunities to network. And that's a really big thing for me, is like networking is so important in the media industry. I don't care if you're in music. I don't care if you're in sports or fashion. Like networking is like, your work is like 30% of it. The other 70, 80%, my math's not great, but like that other percentage of it is networking alone. Like you can have an amazing portfolio. If you don't know anyone, you're screwed.
Yeah.
So like, I think that was a really big thing, was just like knowing that my profs and my TAs and people at school were also in the industry. And I figure like, I can work so hard and I can be so talented, but I need those connections. So there was a lot of things, but that was a big thing for me. And like I said, the rest was history, you know what I mean? 5 years later, now I'm here. So
one of the things you said that I really want to touch on is talking about when you first got in, and you said that you were like a deer in headlights. And kind of alluding to the conversation that we had before we started recording. I remember when I thought about going to Ryerson, but then I thought about, wait, like how many people would apply? Like, who am I from Winnipeg? Blah, blah, blah. Like, and then you were even able to get in, but still had that kind of deer in headlights feeling and that uncertainty when you saw people that had experience. And there was little Juan, 17 years old, and people, I'm sure you've seen that photo circulating on Twitter of how they expect you to be going into an entry-level job with 10 years experience. It's the little children with like the hard hats and construction gear on. Like that's probably what was going through your mind, thinking like, what? How do these people have experience and we haven't even started? Like they're on level 3 and we're like, what? What was that experience like? And how did you handle feeling that anxiety and overwhelm of realizing what the landscape was in terms of the competition and how people had already had experience before you? Was it hard to teeter away from that? Or how did you focus in on yourself, knowing all these other things?
I think like at the time, like, yeah, it was pretty intimidating. Like I said, my experience was pretty limited. I was a writer. All I do was type words and make stories like that. Excuse me. I think that was one thing that lent itself pretty well to me getting in. But like I said, like I got in there and I'm like, met all these people and I'm like, whoa, like everyone's like, they're, like I said, people who did so many different things across the board. And so, yeah, it's like they were already kind of on a different level than me. And I think at the time it was just kind of like, I remember very early on, I was like talking to my friends and talking to my family, and like, man, I think I made a mistake. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know any of this. Like, they're making us use Photoshop. I've never touched Photoshop in my life. Like, there's a podcast we have to do. I don't know how to do audio. Like, I don't. But I just kind of, you know, when I looked at it from a bigger scale, I was just like, if these people can do it, why not me? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I also entered in the year, I took a year off after high school. So I actually came in a year older than anyone. Not that that makes a difference, but it was also just like, some of these people are younger than me. You know what I mean? Like, if they can do it, why can't I? Again, it's only a year, but like, that was just something at the time when you're 17, 18, you're thinking about that stuff. And then just, I kind of realized that, like, if I wanted to make stuff happen, like, I had to stop looking at what other people are doing. If I wanted to improve and progress, like, I needed to both take advantage of the resources, but being my classmates and my professors, and learn from them, because that's what, like, at the end of the day, you go to university to learn. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, if you're going to an engineering class first year, they're not going to make you build a machine. Like, you're there to learn, you're there to experiment and figure out what you want to do. So I kind of, you know, I had to put that kind of anxiety aside, because, you know, I'm here for 4 years, and it ended up being 5, same thing. I'm here for X amount of years to learn. That's what I'm here to do. And then it just kind of became like, you know, going from not knowing how to open Photoshop to understanding how to make something, and learning from people. And I think for anybody who's going to be in that situation, I think the biggest piece of advice I'd have to give, if I can give one, is don't be afraid to ask for help. There are so many people who, throughout my 4 years of university, I would have not made out of it. I would have not been here without them. Friends, family, like, just like TAs, professors, like, so many people. Like, I learned ultimately at the end of the day, like, it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to say, I don't know how to do this. And like, at the end of the day, just by you saying that, it kind of, you know, that's how you're going to learn. Do you know what I mean? Like, I didn't know how to use Photoshop. I asked someone I knew, they taught me. Now I know. Now I build on this, right? So it was very much a deer in the headlights kind of like, whoa, what am I doing? But, you know, I think that's the early nerves. You know what I mean? Like, just like an athlete, like, you play your first rookie game, like, your brain is everywhere. You don't know what's going on, but, you know, you get hockey relative, obviously, because I work in hockey, you get a few shifts under your legs, and you get a couple hits, a couple shots, and you feel right at home, right? So it was just about that progress of, like, not knowing what I was doing, just getting immersed in it. And like, you know, any kid going into university, it's intimidating, no matter what program. I could have been a genius at kinesiology and gone right in there and still would have been the same thing. But I think you also mentioned it, a really intimidating thing is how competitive the landscape is. But I'm a competitive person by nature, so I kind of welcome that part as a challenge, and that kind of did motivate me to get better, you know. And I'm the kind of person where I'm like, I see what my classmates are doing, and seeing the projects they're working on, and I'm like, I want to do that, but I want to do it better, not just to one up them, because that's not my point. But it's just to improve myself. Do you know what I mean? Because if I can be better than them, in a sense, I can also improve myself and improve on what I do now. And I'll touch on this maybe later, but there's this thing you're probably familiar with, imposter syndrome.
Of course.
Yeah, and that's something like, being now, like, out of university and this being my full-time thing, being a content creator, I had imposter syndrome back in, I didn't even realize it. That was imposter syndrome 101 in first year university, when I didn't know what it was. I was like, I shouldn't be here, because you're looking at other people, right? And like, that's something I encounter now. But there's this one piece of advice that I wish I would have gone in my first year, but I got it at the right time, from one of my producers at MLSC when I was with them a few years ago. And he said to me, the best way to improve and succeed in this industry is by understanding that is not by looking at everyone else and seeing what they're doing and getting scared by it. It's understanding that there are people doing exactly what you're doing, but you also have to look inside and say, your biggest competition is yourself. There's no, like, you are playing against yourself, and that's it. Don't worry about anybody else around you. And I think I subconsciously followed that through university, where, like, yeah, I'm looking at what other people are doing and it's impressive, but at the end of the day, like, I have to improve on myself, and I have to compete with myself to keep going. So that's a bit of a longer fledged answer, but it was just a lot of nerves, and then just getting your feet under you it was just that kind of process when I got into the school.
And when you think about what you've been able to achieve, even in the short time since then, I remember seeing some of your videos about, like, the classic Photoshop tutorial. if you do the thing and you do it right and you don't fuck it up, it works. It just works. That's a sound on TikTok, actually, that I heard recently. When I saw it, I was like, this sound literally describes watching Photoshop tutorials for someone that's a beginner. Because for people that have so much experience, it's just a few clicks here, a few clicks there, boom, boom, boom. Perfect. We're good. And I remember seeing some of your videos, like, man, like, how does he do that? Oh my God, like, this is amazing. But it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. When you look at like people doing that in your first year, like, that's crazy. But now, because you said, I'm vulnerable, I need help, can you help me? I think that's one of the biggest things that's one of the biggest things that's hard for people to get over, is like when our ego gets in the way. That's when we start to look at what other people are doing. That's when we start to worry about, well, do I know everything I think I'm supposed to? If I don't, then that means that I'm not doing well. And then the spirals start coming. But by you showing that you were vulnerable and admitting I needed help, and then when someone showed you, that's where you learn the most. I was actually listening to, or there's another sound on TikTok, a lot of them, that has gone viral recently, but in a very specific way. It's a soundbite of Jordan Peterson talking on a podcast where he says, you have to let your children do dangerous things carefully. Like when they're doing something dangerous carefully, which, wrap your head around that, you have to let them do it and screw up. That's when they do all their learning. And when I hear that sound, it makes me think of this. Maybe not that you're doing something dangerous, but when you're doing something that you care about, carefully, but you're screwing it up, that's when you're going to learn, rather than if you're doing it and no problems are coming. Because when no problems are happening, like, what is there to worry about? But then when you run into a problem when it matters the most and you're not experienced, that's when you're going to have a disaster. So it's interesting how that vulnerability element was so key to you getting over the hump, forgetting the imposter syndrome, and actually learning enough to get to a point where you're confident in your ability to belong in the industry.
Yeah, and like to kind of add to that, like that was my number one thing. Like that, my number one thing that kept me going to university was like, this is the best time to mess up. This is the best time to fuck up. You know what I mean? Like if I mess up on a project now, like it might cost me a grade. Like I might get a C and not an A. And like even by my fourth year of university, like, and you know this too, like by your fourth year, it's like C's get degrees. Like you're just trying to get out of there. But like to everyone listening, go to school, get good grades. But my point being, it's just like when I was in school, like you can't take yourself seriously. Like you have to understand that this is a learning process. And like for people who, some people are like, oh, like your work is awesome, like you've always been doing so well. I'm like, I'm not perfect. Like I didn't just spawn at Ryerson and start making hype videos. Like I had to learn. I like one of the first videos I ever did was like a feature on one of the Ryerson athletes, and like I didn't even know how to turn on the camera at the time. Like but like that one, like you said, I think ego is a huge thing about it, especially when you get further. But even now, like the one thing like I try to do all the time is if I don't know how to do something, I ask someone who knows how to. Whether it's some people in my network, my coworkers, my creative friends. If I don't know how to do something, I just ask. There's no harm in doing. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the biggest thing, is just not being afraid to ask for help, because there's always someone who knows how to do it. You know, someone is always above you or at the same level and just has different skills. I'm just saying that. And at the end of the day, it benefits you because you learn a skill, and it benefits them because honestly, whenever I get asked for help, I learn something myself. You know what I mean? I figure something out about my work or even myself as a person. But getting back onto the topic of kind of, sorry, we were talking about, before we talked about vulnerability, you mentioned one thing and I completely just lost track of it.
Like the imposter
was it
syndrome?
I mentioned the imposter, yeah, it was kind of the imposter syndrome thing as well. Like it's just something you have to shake and understand. Oh, sorry, no, it wasn't that. It was making mistakes. That was the next. Sorry. So making mistakes. The making mistakes thing is just like, you know, you can mess up in school. It's meant for you to mess up. All by like, yeah, like you have some leeway in the professional world to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. No one is perfect. But I think being okay and saying to yourself, I'm not a perfect human. I'm gonna fail. Not being afraid of failure has been one of the most important things for me. Don't get me wrong, I'm still scared to fail. Like I'm whenever I get asked to do a project for a client, or even when I took the NHL job or any of my other jobs, the first thing in the back of your head is like, damn, like I better not mess up here. Like I'm doomed. But like you're gonna have to, you're at some points you're gonna fall and you just need to get back. You need to be able to get back up. You're gonna get knocked down no matter what you do, no matter how old are you, no matter what you're doing, what level you're doing it at, like you're going to fall down, and that's okay. And understanding like that's not the end of the world. It's just you're growing as a person and you're trying to make it from one place to another. And there's bumps and bruises along the way, but at the end of the day, if you understand, you go in there with that mentality, you'll be okay.
Isn't there a song that Chumbawamba made? It goes something along the lines of "I get knocked down, but I get back up again," or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, I think so.
I think that's a perfect analogy. As a kid, I didn't even know what the lyrics were. It was just I recognized that blaring tune and the chorus, but when I learned about the lyrics, it made me realize, wow, you know, you insert every cliche quote from Rocky Balboa, from Chumbawamba, from whatever you want about getting. It's not how hard you get hit; it's how hard you get hit and keep moving forward. You get knocked down, get back up again, et cetera, et cetera. But they're cliches for a reason. Now a cliche isn't going to make you become a superhuman because you still have to live in order to go through those experiences, but they exist as guidelines for a reason. They're not just there to lie to you.
Yeah, no, like I think you're right. Like it's kind of like you said, like being like making sure your children like mess up, but carefully. Like it's like there are guidelines, right? Like I think understanding that you can fuck up, but trying your best not to. Like, you know what I mean? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. You just have to walk a very fine line. Do you know what I mean? Like even nowadays, like I might try something new in a video. It might not work, but it just might. But sometimes you just got to throw caution to the wind. And like I said, don't be afraid to take risks either, but calculated risks. You know what I mean? You don't want to like try to jump from building to building if you know you can't do it. But if you really need to and you feel like you can't, like it's a weird metaphor, but like I think taking calculated risks is the best way. But just understanding like you're gonna fall, but you don't want to fall too many times, right? It's all about balance and making sure you're understanding that.
When it comes to calculated risks, that's it's like when people say don't guess, take an educated guess. Like you're still taking some sort of risk, but you've at least put some thought into it. I mean, it doesn't like people are fallible all the same, but some people have more experience. That's it. Like, it's not, I'm more right than you. It's, I'm less wrong because I've learned more over time. Right. Like when you think about it from that way.
Mm-hmm. And experience is the greatest teacher. Do you know what I mean? Like, I still take calculated risks all the time. That's what got me into university. That's what got me into doing all this stuff in the first place. But I think like you don't really know how risky some of these things were, or even you don't understand how important they were until you actually do it. And like I just said, experience is the greatest teacher. There's so many things that I look back at now and I'm like, I'm so glad I took that risk. But I also look back at it now, I'm like, wow, that was really stupid. But it worked out at the same time. Do you know what I mean? Like, so you have those things, but like truly you only learn by going through it all. And even now, I don't think I've gone through everything I could go through my career, but I still think back on some things I did and I'm thankful I did them. But then you learn for the future. I'm like, maybe taking this way was a little bit of a better idea and trying this thing versus what you did in the past, because you could have gotten burned by it. Right. So it's just about going through the motions and understanding and then learning through progress and experience.
Like we were talking about before the podcast recording, we were saying something along the lines of we were talking about the butterfly effect and how, you don't need to go to school to do what you're doing, but at the same time, would you have done all the same things that you've done up to this point in your life, or at least through your post-high school life, if you hadn't have gone to school? Would you have met all the same people? If you would have just sat in a basement and just said, okay, I'm going to pound it out every single day, watching tutorials on YouTube and practicing on Photoshop and all this stuff, I'm not going to meet anybody. As long as I'm amazing at what I do, that's what matters. Like you said before, like your network matters 70-30 compared to the actual quality of the work you're doing. So even when I look back on my degree at U of M, Did I learn anything that was an aha or epiphany moment in any one of my classes? No. But did the people I meet, the professors I connected with, and the experiences of what I learned that I didn't want to do help me to do what I am doing right now? Yeah, more than anything else. If I would have just done nothing, I wouldn't have learned anything about myself. And I'm not trying to be cliche like Gary Vee, you know, but like you got to experiment and you got to do as many things as you can so you can get context and perspective. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, like
Shout out to
think
Neiman
that,
Az
like,
though. He's the real Gary Vee impersonation
no,
guy.
I love me, like,
All credit
he's
goes to him.
hilarious. He's awesome. I love his Gary impressions. But like, I know people give Gary a hard time, and I know he's a bit eccentric, but like the man knows what he's doing, right? Like,
Yes.
he's successful for a reason, and his advice, like, you know, like there are some people who like, yeah, like people don't like Gary Vee, or like I put up a TikTok today about just I got this book by Russ, you know, the artist, and some people don't like Russ, but someone commented, I'm like, oh, but you're taking advice from Russ, and someone else commented, they were like, yeah, but like when you think about how people carry themselves and their mentality and their determination to do things, like that's what matters. Like Gary Vee is an interesting guy, and you might not agree with everything you say, but you can't disagree with the fact that the guy's lived through experiences, he went through the mud, and he's here, and his advice carries weight, right? But to kind of roll back from the Gary Vee conversation, to your point, like if the question's like, would I, like we were talking before for context, I was saying like I could have gone, I went to university, and people all the time ask me, would you go to university to do what you do now? Like what do you recommend me going? Do I need to go to school? I'll say this kind of right off the bat. I think everyone should go to post-secondary, not just for the degree. You know, and I know it's not for everybody, right? Like, you know, I know a lot of my friends dropped out. I have a lot of friends who didn't go to university, and they're doing just fine. I think university nowadays is kind of depending on what you want to do. I think it's important because it develops you as a person. I think I grew so much over those last 5 years as a human being, whether it was through my education, through my, you know, friendships, relationships, life experiences. Like you grow as a person. And I think that was, you know, when I look back on my university experience, the number one takeaway I'm forever going to have for my time at Ryerson were just the people that I met. You know, just some of the most incredible, talented, kind people, most of which are now lifelong friends, and people who I talk to every single day. Even some of my TAs and professors are some of my biggest mentors and people who I trust with decisions on a like for so many things. So in that sense, like, yeah, I would definitely go back to university, and I would do it all over again because of those people, because of those experiences for growth. Now, when it comes to what I actually do and what my career is, if you're just starting out and you're wondering, do I need to be in school to be a content creator? Absolutely not. You do not need to go to school to do what I do, because there's something, and I love calling it this, YouTube University exists. Like everything I learned, sorry about the cough, everything I learned in school, and this isn't a knock on the program, but it's just because when they developed the program 5 years ago, 6 years ago, or however many, I think it would have been 6 years ago now, social media and digital content was not as prevalent. It is very broadcast based. It is very journalism based. It is kind of set back a few years. And up until this point, I don't know how much it's changed, but a lot of the things I learned aren't really applicable to what I do. And that's fine. There's still so many things I learned over the years, and there's so many skills that I still took away. And I wouldn't have picked up a camera if it wasn't for this program. That's the biggest thing for me. It's like, would I go back to do this all over again? Yeah, just because I discovered what I want to do during this, I would have never picked up a camera before university. I would have never touched Photoshop. I hated Photoshop. Like that's a sticking point for me. I did design during my time at TSN. I never liked design originally. If it wasn't for school, I wouldn't touch Photoshop with a 10-foot pole. It scared the hell out of me. But like, I would go back just because throughout those experiences, I learned who I was and I learned what I wanted to do. Now, like I said, if you're just starting off and you know you want to be a content creator, you want to work in sports, or you want to be a photographer or whatever, it's as easy as going onto YouTube, looking up a couple tutorials and just doing it. Like, even if you don't have a camera, use your phone. If you want to just start designing, get a trial version of Photoshop and just start doing stuff. Like, especially for this line of work in the digital age, like you really don't need to go to school as much as people pressure you to. School's important for so many reasons, but if I had to pick up a camera before university and you're asking me this 6 years ago, I'm like, I'm not going to school. I can learn everything I need to know online. There's YouTube tutorials. There's so many websites for master classes and other things, like everything I've learned
Skillshare
up to
even
this
too,
point.
like that's a website that's so
Skillshare,
underrated.
exactly. And like even up until this point, like when I'm looking back at everything, it's just like I I I still didn't learn. Like After Effects barely touched it in university, or like not even actual video editing, learning how to tell a story, which is like the basis of what I think is the most important thing as a creative, is telling a story and being able to talk to people is not something you learn in school. It's something you learn when you're out doing it, which is, we talked about this a little bit too. It's like when we started the program, they always said, we want to see we're interested in you guys learning in class, but it's more important what you do outside of class. Like I love, similar to you podcasting, I love doing sit down features. I love interviewing people for features, very similar to this. But I love being able to talk to someone and hear their story and being able to then take it in a video format and build it and tell their story that way. But I would have never learned how to do that if I just didn't go out and do it. So some things like school is good for that, right? But again, like some of the technical stuff, or even like I said, storytelling, school could never tell me how to go from take athlete, interview athlete, and tell a story, because every story, you just have to go out and do it. So to kind of answer your question, I would go back purely just for the experience of meeting people, building myself up as a person, the connections. Another really big thing that I'll touch on really quickly, because I think that's an important thing that I've always held really true. And I've said this quote before on several different platforms and in several different places, but I'm a big believer in the thing that your network is your net worth. You are nothing without your, like I said, like I didn't say this before, but like my work experiences and getting to all these places, having a portfolio is so important. But if you don't have that many people to show, you're kind of out of luck, right? Like it's networking, being in the right place at the right time, knowing the right people. And you don't even need to know anybody really high end. Like my opportunities have come from, knowing someone at the top, at the bottom level who just works there. And with TSN, it was just that. For example, like when TSN, when I got hired, it was literally one of my friends who was already working there. And he said to me, like, hey, like we've lost a few people. We need a few new designers. I know you're getting into it. Would you want to come and chat? And it was just like that. And even then at the time, my work was okay. It wasn't great. But it was just kind of having that connection and having that open door. The MLSE thing, same thing. I had a classmate who sent me an application because she like helped out part-time at MLSE, and she sent me this application for an editing position, and I just applied on a whim. And it was just by having someone in that network, in that area. Like there's just, it is, networking is the most important thing. So that's one thing I learned through university. But to kind of stop rambling on and on, I would have gone back just for the experiences of growth as a human and meeting my best friends now and all these things. But if it came down to, I already knew this stuff beforehand, or I knew what I wanted to do, I don't think you really need to a degree, right? So
Yeah, man. I mean, everything you said is 100% true. Like when it comes to content creation, that is something now that it's like a life-changing opportunity, if you really ask me.
Absolutely.
Because the demand for people that know how to edit a video, they know how to tell a story, they know how to shoot a video as well, they know how to design. There's billions of people in the world can write, okay? Any person can go and hack away at a keyboard and think, boom, like there you go, Charles Dickens. Like, or people that, a lot of people know how to talk, but it's like, can you tell a story? Can you lead an interview in a way, it's like a dance, right? Can you do it in a way that's going to cultivate the most interesting answers? Like we saw the other day with the exchange between the Edmonton reporter Jim Matheson and Leon Draisaitl, like asking those kinds of questions that are leading in a bad way, or you're trying to poke the tiger with a stick and there's friction and whatever, that's not going to get compelling stories. It's going to get compelling social media clickbait for sure, but it's not going to get compelling stories. And that's one of the hardest things about the industry. Can you tell stories in a compelling way? Like you just said, the program is literally designed to teach you how to write, to show you how to use the basics of Photoshop and this, that, and the other, and a tour around all of beautiful downtown Toronto. But did someone really say to you explicitly, Juan, this is what you do when you call an athlete. This is what you ask them. This is how you do it. This is the angle you want. This is how you put it together. Boom, feature, amazing. There's not very many programs, if any, that I can recall that know how to put together those features. I know with my program at Centennial, we do stuff that is centered around features and like learning how to do the basics. But anything that's going to be phenomenal is going to be based on trial and error. So if as everyone is assumed at ground zero, they're not going to say, okay, Martin Scorsese's coming in to do a master class. You guys better take notes on how he made all these films. Like that's not how it works. So
no, yeah,
it's interesting how these people like learn from doing more than they do from someone like telling them how to do it.
Yeah, like again, to a degree, like I did learn a lot of the basics, like you said. Like first year we had to do a feature. That's how I said how I fell in love. I had to do a feature on an athlete, and they said this is the camera, this is how it works, this is how you can light somebody, this is how you mic them up. But there was no really instruction on how to tell the story, and that just comes over time. That just comes with experience, right? Like if I was to go back and show you my first year feature compared to something I would have made this year, night and day difference. Obviously, it's been 6 years. I hope there would have been a difference, but like. I think the program prepared you, but the technical side and understanding, again, it was very broadcast based. So there were a lot of broadcast classes where you can make content for the show, the broadcast show you make. But when it came to the concept of telling stories, that's just something I had to learn. And this is where the concept of asking for help is so important because, and this comes also with the network. It's all really like asking for help and network is your net worth it all kind of meshes together because like some of my biggest like mentors were people who were storytellers in the industry, and I would just hit them up with a DM and be like, hey, like I just want to talk to you because I think you're really good at telling stories and I just want to understand your mindset. And this is when it's okay to ask for help. And I think that's more important than ever now, when in the age we're in. But like I remember like, and I know you had Matt Shinetti on the show a little while back because I saw one of the episodes was with him. He's a really good, like I would say he's a friend at this point. Back in the day, like he came talk to our class, and I remember, just asking him for if I could reach out to him because I just think the guy knows how to tell a story really well. He's just a really good storyteller. He's a genuine human being. He loves like what he does with the CFL. It's awesome. Like it's amazing to see how he knows so many things, and he's on the sideline. They're doing a feature the next day, and man, like the biggest like full circle moment for me was, and again, just with him, because like I've known him for every single year I was in university, and we still talk here and there. Like just working with the CFL last summer with the Argos and being on the sideline with him, it brought me back because in my first year, I asked him, can I shadow you one day? And he took me to shadow him at an Argos game that he was doing sideline at. 5 years later, I'm not next to him doing the shadowing, but I'm telling a story my own way with the camera on the sideline, and he's just down the way. And like we would chat before games and a little bit of banter and ask how each other were doing. And it was just a full circle moment of like me just reaching out to someone, asking for their help, taking me under their wing, helping me out whenever I needed it. And then now I'm nowhere near his level because he's been doing this forever, but like he's a colleague now. And it's crazy to think that, I would have never thought about that 5 years ago. So like, it is just, school doesn't prepare you for everything, but what prepares you for things is just meeting people, interacting, having these experiences. Storytelling doesn't come with getting a good mark in class. It's like a muscle. The more stories you tell, the more videos you edit, the better you get. It doesn't just happen overnight. You know what I mean? Yeah, it helped that I love telling stories, but the way I tell a story 5 years ago versus now is completely different. So it is interesting to kind of see that progression. But yeah, no, like I think you put it really well when you were saying like it just doesn't happen overnight, and you just kind of have to have all these experiences in order to get there.
When you mention someone like Matt, he is one of the best at creating video essays about a multitude of sports. Like I'm a huge CFL fan, probably bigger than anyone you'll see or I can guarantee bigger than anyone you'll see in Toronto. That's for sure. At least in the city of Toronto, but maybe not across the entire CFL. Well, being from Winnipeg,
Hamilton's just down the road. I'm pretty sure
exactly. And being from Winnipeg will do that to you. And thankfully our Grey Cup spell was broken. Maybe unfortunately for Hamilton fans against them twice in a row, but they'll eventually get theirs as they are a super loyal fan base as well. And they got a lot of great people who I've been fortunate enough to interview running the organization. So big kudos to Hamilton fans for sticking through the struggles that they've experienced. But when it comes to what Matt does, like he's phenomenal at creating video essays. Even the feature he did with Nick Arbuckle was incredible. Like it was so compelling. And to know what he had struggled through with like his family life growing up, it was just crazy. And like, that's to me, like when I followed and watched more and more of his work over time, like those are the kinds of stories I think are so important, because every person and their mom wants to tell a story about Austin Matthews. Every single person wants to talk to Connor McDavid or wants to talk to, the best, like Patrick Mahomes, whatever. It's like, listen, Super Bowl, Stanley Cup Finals, all that stuff is all great. But when it comes to just when you're starting out, or even if you're starting to get really good, a very wise person who I met, who's an alumni of the Centennial program, told me, the book Blue Oceans is so important, not just in business, in life. Don't go where red oceans are, where there's been battles and blood and everything. Go to blue oceans where barely anyone has been. The CFL, especially in the city of Toronto, is a perfect example of that. Like we're making jokes about how very few people cheer for the Argos in Toronto. It's unfortunate. I don't want the Argos to have a weak fan base. I want to have a great fan base. I want everyone to see your kick-ass work with the Argos, because how great is your work compared to if no one was like, if people actually watched way more of it in terms of like people who love the Argos and got to see the experimentation with 8K and all this stuff. Like the content creation was off the charts and the storytelling was amazing. But if there aren't people to go see it, it's like, it doesn't validate it's how phenomenal it is as much. But again, being in the CFL, looking at the stories that Matt tells, looking at the work that you do with the Argos, like those are the things that are memorable. Seeing how much the league's presence is captivated and how much better they did this year with promoting it through social media, through the experimentation with the high definition cameras. Like as a CFL fan, I love that. I saw boomers who were upset. But it's like, man, like they got to try something. What are they going to do? Roll out with a Sony handheld camcorder like this Trailer Park Boys?
No, like I think you're absolutely right. Like I'll touch on Matt really quickly before I move on to kind of you're talking about the CFL and that, because I CFL, like, believe it or not, I mean, I don't know, like I'm not a big football fan. I was born in Colombia, so my football is soccer. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't when I got here, football, throwing it with a hand, like what, like that doesn't make sense. But like before, so like I said, I'll touch on that. But like just for context, like I'm not a big football fan at all. I watched the NFL. I really followed it this year because I liked working with the CFL. But like the CFL for me was like so integral in growing as like just this one summer alone, just those 4 or 5 months of the season this year, getting to work with the Argos were some of the most incredible and crucial moments in my career. If I didn't do that Argos thing, I'm not with the NHL right now. I'll tell you that for sure. But like when it comes to Matt, like he's a pioneer for like telling stories in CFL, and not just CFL, like in Canada. Like there's so many people in the media industry who do such a good job of telling stories. But like no one like Matt. Like very early on in my career, and even now, like I still look at Matt's work for inspiration. Like it's his way of putting words together and understand, like there's more to an athlete than just their play on the field. There's so much more to it. Like there was one video that I remember in particular that he did years ago, that I remember seeing it because he I don't remember where I saw it, but I just know he did it with Patrick Chan, and it's a beautifully shot video. You probably know which one I'm talking about. I don't know if you, but it's this beautiful video of Patrick Chan, the Canadian ice skater, on a paddleboard in the middle of a lake in Northern Ontario. And this is ahead of, I think, 2018 Olympics. And it's beautifully shot. And I know Alex Anthony was the DP on that, also a super talented guy, Toronto guy. But the script that Matt worked with Patrick on, like they're talking about how like they compare Patrick being on the lake and how at peace he feels being on this water lake, and comparing it to how he feels on the ice. And there's just so many different little nuances there that tell a beautiful story about how this is his way of finding peace. But the parallel to it is also on water. I'll buy it frozen, and about how this is his last year in the Olympics and he knows that this is his last opportunity. And it's just this beautiful like amalgamation of beautiful cinematics and amazing storytelling. And like I said, I think the one thing is just like, you're talking about a guy on a water on a paddleboard, and you're comparing it to a guy skating on ice, and you realize, oh, like, oh shit, it's both on water. It's just a different metaphor. And it's like, kudos to Matt, because like, just the way you can tell the story. And I'll say this as well, Matt, one thing that's really underrated, and you kind of touched on it, really underrated in this industry that Matt is really good on, and I wish to be half as good as him one day, is connecting with an athlete, building rapport, and actually being able to talk to somebody. And like, you know, I could go up to Austin Matthews and be like, oh yeah, you scored 4 goals your rookie game. That must have been nice. Oh yeah, you know, you just got the puck on net, put the puck in deep, whatever. But like, if you know how to talk to someone, like for me, like a dream situation, I would love one day to kind of compare it to like going beyond just the sport and finding those stories like Matt does. Also in the CFL, like this guy, like I said, he's a pioneer in the CFL. Like he tells stories, like he digs deep. One thing I would love to do in comparison, like I would love to interview Austin, like do a feature on Austin Matthews one day, but nothing about him being on the ice. I want to talk to him about what it's like being like half Mexican playing in the NHL. I'm Latino. I want to hear that story. It's been touched on, but I want to talk to him about it. And so like just that added layer of storytelling, not just, you know, telling them what's going on the field, but like Matt does this all the time with the CFL guys, like about, especially because that's it's a development league. I don't like calling it that, but to a degree, a lot of guys grow in it. And those stories are so interesting, and kind of flipping it over, like working in the CFL this year, like such an incredible experience, because I didn't know anything about the CFL to a degree before working with the Argos. I know how football's played. My first season at MLSC, I did a lot of Argos stuff, and it was a horrific season. I think that's the year they had like 2 wins right before, like it was the first season.
14. That's why when they went 4-14.
Yeah. And I just remember like it was brutal. Like me and my producer, who were still good friends at the time, Taylor Iannarelli, also a great mentor and super talented guy, we were talking about it, and we're like, man, that first year sucked. And then look at this year, we're first in the East. Like this was before we lost, but like, oh my God, like this is the year. But like the CFL experience is incredible. Like and I understand now why Matt's so passionate about it, because those guys are awesome, man. Like I got to meet so many of them. I got to talk to so many of them, just like awesome guys playing for the love of, and like that's the good thing about the CFL. It's just you're playing for the love of the game. Like you're not making the NFL money, so you're playing because you love it and you're trying to keep going. And there's just so many incredible stories in that league. And I think to kind of tie it all back together, like I now understand why Matt loves this league, and why it's so important to him, because there are so many people and so many athletes that have incredible stories that deserve to be told. And you know, you think hopefully those stories would help the Argos to get a bit of a bigger fan base, but it's a tough sell. But and I think that the league did a really good job this year, and across the league, like the content teams. And I don't want to boost our tires at the Argos. I know we're awesome, and that I have to give us kudos. But like across the league this year, there was a massive wave of content. Every team was doing awesome stuff. And like, yeah, I'll say this, our social guy and kind of head of everything, Adam Kruger at the Argos, he's a genius. He's a social media god. We poke fun of the teams a lot. I don't know if you knew, we like to check the memes out.
Oh, of course,
but like across the league, like you said, the innovation they had in the broadcast, like I saw that in the content side. I saw that on Twitter. Like I'm talking to like the video guy from the Ticats. I'm talking to some of the social people at the Red Blacks. And like, we were just saying, like, it's incredible how this year, and it was also the first season since that 2018 season because of the pandemic, because we didn't get 2019, we didn't get 2020.
They did get 2019, not 2020 though.
Oh, sorry. Then it would have been, that bad season would have been 2019. So we never got 2020. There was that gap year, and that the pandemic kind of all ties back to the pandemic. Is like digital content blew up because of the pandemic, because we're like, oh shit, we're all inside. Like, what do we do? So like there was just an incredible wave of storytelling content and visual content across the CFL this year. And it was awesome to see. It was even awesome to be a part of. Like I said, most memorable year of my career was these last 4 months, working with the best people, telling stories, making cool stuff. Like it was, I'm a CFL fan for life now. I'm an Argos fan for life. You know, like just because I worked with them. But it all, again, I'm not going to tie it all back. This would have never happened without guys like Matt telling stories like this and putting the players in the spotlight, and the, you know, TSN being their main broadcaster, and obviously I worked with TSN too, so I had another connection with them that way. So it all goes back to Matt. Without him, none of this is possible, and he's just such a great storyteller, and it impacts so many levels down the road. Even a couple of years later, you don't even realize, but then you just, when you look back, you're like, this would have never happened without this individual.
And the butterfly effect still stands the test of time without all the people he would have met, without having reached out to Matt, without him having also gone to Ryerson, without him going to
Yeah,
TSN.
you can even go way further back like that.
He
Yeah,
went to Ryerson.
you can find out, yeah, he was a Ryerson grad, and like there was all the connections. Like, it's true.
Yeah, it's crazy, man, because it all ties back to, he even said to me, he's like, well, I wanted to work a Canadian press and I didn't get the job and I was shattered, and I decided to go back to school to do a master's at Ryerson, and didn't know if I wanted to do that much stuff in sports. And now here he is, being a pioneer and just doing genius work with the CFL, and a league that often gets overlooked, at least in, you know, Southern Ontario outside of Hamilton, where people just don't realize how amazing some of the stories are. And it's the job of him and other people to jump on the train and be like, well,
Yeah,
there are great stories, and the content teams did an amazing job this year. Like, I know
absolutely.
a guy who was working with the Bisons and doing stuff with the Bombers, name, I think, is Nick Kowalski. And
Yeah, I'm familiar with Nick.
And now he's the guy for BC, like just got picked up for the Lions for next year. And it's like, boom, like you get that snow game where the Bisons play the Golden Bears, and you get the perfect optics for shooting video, and you get to do a good job. You can tell some great stories. People are going to like it. I remember the first year in 2019 when I remember at the Banjo Bowl, I was there in Winnipeg, and they used Simpsons clips to reference house rules of the stadium. And I was like, that's so genius. And they use South Park. I'm like, this connects with me. Like, this connects with my generation, because I don't want to see, please do not throw blah, blah, blah. I want to see Homer Simpson on the phone saying, they were the suckiest group of sucks. And I want to see the Argos and the Bombers beef on social media about who has the better social media team. It doesn't matter who is the argument. Like, they're generating buzz, and they're doing it well. And that's what matters.
And I think, and to your point, like even at the Argos Stadium, like I had never been to an Argos game in fucking life. And the first game shooting, like during one of the TV timeouts, they're playing cat videos on the Jumbotron. And I'm like, that's awesome, because my generation grew up on Vine and YouTube and stupid cat videos. And like the fans were loving it. And I know it's such a stupid, it's cat videos, but I think the CFL, and this is kind of like, it's like recycling, like the cycle, like there's just a cycle now that like, I think the thing with the CFL over the last couple, even the last decade, I think the biggest reason why there was such a sharp decline in fandom is because other leagues obviously have money that the CFL doesn't. Ergo, they can invest way more in so many different things. Now, I think with the accessibility of social media, with the accessibility of technology, of internet culture is so like I said, Adam is one of the most intelligent people when it comes to Adam Creer, for reference, I know I mentioned before, one of the most intelligent people when it comes to coming up with the most funny thing to poke fun at a team. Like, he would text me at like 10 at night and be like, there was one that I really loved doing. When we played the Red Blacks in the last game of the season, last game of the season against them, their quarterback's name was Duck. And then Adam was just like,
oh yeah,
can we take his face? Yeah, Devlin Hodges, his nickname is Duck. And so he's like, can we do something with Duck Hunter? And I spent the whole night like tracking the Red Blacks logo and his face on the Ducks, and the Argos logo was the dog. And like, I think, like, first of all, like, this genius idea, I would have never done it myself, but like but like that post blew up. Like, people loved it, because they was also combining older boomer culture, which is iconic because it's a video game, but with meme culture and the internet. And I think that mixed in with this amazing content, the point I'm getting to is, I think with this kind of, and I think it did take a little longer because we missed that season with COVID, that 2020 season. I think the next few years are going to be so much better for the CFL in terms of engagement and views with the younger audience, not just the older, because the main fans right now are, they're that older audience in their 50s and 60s, 40s who grew up with the CFL in the early 2000s and the 90s when it was big. I think we're going to see, it might not happen right away, but I think over the next 5, 6, 7 years, we're going to see a huge increase in the interest in CFL because there's the internet. The internet exists now, and I think the teams have great personalities on their teams. I think they're hiring great personalities, people like Adam, who just have sass on social media and just they're not afraid to chirp other teams, and the teams are investing in content. They brought me on, and I shout out to Adam again. I wouldn't be in the NHL if it wasn't for him. It was my first time shooting for an MLSE team. They're bringing very talented people on, and these talented people are making amazing visual content, hype videos, features, and now that's sports content, and I love the sports content world on Twitter and Instagram. It's just so many talented people. I think that is going to reinvigorate the CFL digitally. And I think it's going to bring more people to games eventually. It might not happen right away, but I think that we're just going to see this cycle of it starting to ramp up again because of all these innovations in social media, the innovations in internet culture, and just so many things are going to start ramping that wheel back. And I think we'll see a big increase in popularity, especially with the younger demographic, like just with how things have been going.
You look what the NFL's been doing too with the whole Nickelodeon thing. Like people think,
Yeah,
oh, that's
absolutely
stupid. Why would they do that? It's like, hello, dingbat. They're trying to market to kids. You ever thought about that?
Yeah,
it's not like they're pushing
it's
cigarettes or drugs. Like they're engaging the next generation of fans.
Yeah, and I think some people like the older generation, like they like to gatekeep a little bit. And you know what? Like, kudos to you. Like, okay, you're a big CFO. I get it. But it does frustrate me when it's like, you know, they're trying something new. They're trying to stick with the times. Like they're just trying to keep reeling people in, right? Like that's all it is. And you know, boomer culture and whatnot, like, you know, it is what it is. It's just part of the world now. But like, I think sports leagues are innovating, and you're not going to please everybody. You know what I mean? Like, I've seen comments on my hype videos to the others like, "Oh, this is a great video, but they're not going to win the field." Like, that's not the point of the video.
No.
That's the point of the video. The point of the video is to get someone to look at it. Like, and there's one story that I can't get too into, but it's the perfect analogy. So I'm just going to say it without mentioning any names or any teams.
Yeah, go for it.
And if the person who told me the story, if you're listening to it, I just think it's such a good way of explaining it. So I'm sorry, I'll buy you a beer after. But said person met with this person pitching this idea. And it basically goes along the lines of they wanted to start doing this style of content that was more geared towards getting younger audience. And this organization in particular, you can tell I'm being very careful with my words. This organization in particular is like kind of hesitant because it's kind of different, and it's new, and it's flashy, and it's cool. And at first they were like, no, we don't see why we need to do this. We want to do this the way we've always done it, which is very typical for sports teams, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But and the person who I know who was pitching this, basically he's like, you know, when his higher up said like no, this person goes up, the person I know says, listen, this isn't for you or for me. This isn't for anybody our age anymore. We have to start marketing to the people younger than us. And I see this style of content all the time in the US with college sports. And I don't care about college sports, but when I see one of these pieces of content, I get fired up and I want to watch college sports. So you need to understand that what we're trying to do here isn't to make you happy or isn't to make the athletes happy. It's to bring people into the game again and make them happy and make them come back. So it's just that kind of thing that you just mentioned. It's just like the times are changing, and we need to be okay with that, because it's just about going with the natural order of things and just doing things that might not seem normal to the old guard or people who are been in the industry, but like things change. TikTok is so vital right now for sports teams. TikTok is huge. We have meetings. I had meetings at TSN about TikTok. We talk about TikTok at the NHL. Like you have to do it. And some people are against it because like, oh, it's a stupid video app. I'm like, it's a stupid video app that has over 1 billion users. Like those billion users, how many of those can you hook with a good video, right? So it's just about kind of understanding like sometimes it's not for the person you're working for or for the athletes, it's for the people who are trying to watch, right?
One of the organizations I think does the most genius job of branding themselves is Duolingo. They are absolutely brilliant. You know why?
Okay.
Have you ever seen their TikTok page?
No, I have. I've seen them comment on people's TikToks. I've never actually clicked on those.
Oh my God.
as soon as we get off this, I'm gonna go look at Duolingo TikTok. As soon as I get off this, I promise.
Oh my God. Okay. Wow. Like I almost feel compelled to be like, watch a video right now because it's actually insane. Like,
you know, I'll just pull one up right now.
Pull first video. Doesn't even matter. Pull up the first video you see on Duolingo's TikTok, and you will see exactly what I'm talking about. And for those who are listening, today is Wednesday, January 19th. So whatever the latest TikTok is that Duolingo has, go and watch that. Scroll back on their page.
This is awesome. Yeah, I can see exactly just the Bert. This is awesome. This is amazing.
I'm telling you, you'll scroll for hours and hours. You want to know scrolling on TikTok for hours? Go on Duolingo's. You'll scroll back to the beginning. What they do so what were you gonna say?
Go on. I
was gonna say what they do so brilliantly for the listener who hasn't seen Duolingo's TikToks. There's been a meme circulating around about how the Duolingo owl, like come and harm you physically if you don't do your lessons, or you're gonna threaten your family or whatever. And guess what? When Duolingo caught wind of that, they didn't act like a bunch of toddlers and say no and stomp their feet and plug their ears. They're like, good. I'm glad that you think so high. I'm glad that you think of us in that way. And guess what? Now we're going to brand ourselves around memeing the Duolingo owl. We're going to get them to do tons of trending things that seem risky for other brands that try to toe the line and keep safe, but they go out on a limb and they take risks. And you know what it does? It makes people think of Duolingo. And then when they want to use an app or when they want to engage, the user rate flies through the ceiling. They're not trying to get people to, they're just trying to get attention. And then that's what brings people in. It's not about teaching them language through videos. It's about making people think of Duolingo. It's the most genius marketing I've ever seen in my entire life.
I think like it just kind of like, even just watching one of them, like there's like a satire to it where they're kind of making fun of themselves. And like a really good example of it. And like, I think across, and like, this is an NHL example, and like kind of working in it kind of leads me to go to that. But there's so many, there's one team in particular, and you probably know what team I'm talking about, but the Carolina Hurricanes whole brand is that they're a bunch of jerks, because Don Cherry was mad on TV one day and he's like, oh, bunch of jerks. They sold t-shirts with it on. It's their branding. They don't care. They beef everybody on Twitter. Like Brad Marchand, I don't know if you saw this, today said to them, like, congratulations, this is why you cost us 20% of our escrow. And they reply to him, LOL, it's a joke, Brad. And I'm like, that's awesome. They're not afraid to do anything. And like, that's the thing, when a brand is willing to embrace the hate and willing to embrace a bit of a risk, it works out. Like the Hurricanes are a perfect example of that. When they offer sheeted just Barry Kotkaniemi and they brought out a press release in French, no other team would do that. They're nuts for doing that. But it's amazing because it gets you thinking about them. Like, that's the thing. That's what people don't realize. Like, brands and teams and organizations, when they're willing to take risks and ruffle a few feathers, you're thinking about them. That's the bottom line. Like there's one example, PBR, like Pabst, the beer.
Yeah.
Like 2 weeks ago, they started saying some really weird shit on Twitter. And it was just like, I can't even talk. It was just out there. You'll look it up. You'll find it. It was out there. But then I started thinking about it. I'm like, either A, someone decided to go rogue on your Twitter account, or B, you're just trying to get traction. And they were trending, like, by the end of the day. And it's just like, you know what? Like, yeah, you said some pretty questionable stuff. It's pretty funny if you're a 24-year-old guy. But when was the last time I thought about PBR? It's not a good beer.
No.
But someone going rogue on the Twitter account made you think about it. And maybe next time and not for me, but someone else, maybe you'll get some of the LCBO. But brands who are willing to do that and make fun of themselves and have a little fun and take a little bit of a risk are some of the ones that are the most successful. Even at the Argos, like we'll do that all the time. We'll engage with the fans. We'll poke fun at them, and like it's have fun. But you're thinking about us. You wasted time commenting on our video anyways, so we're just gonna keep it going.
And the same thing I noticed in the NFL, like the Los Angeles Chargers, like their social media team's probably the best in the entire NFL. It's amazing. I would say the Los Angeles Chargers, their social team is the gold standard across pro sports. Yeah.
And I remember sending one of them the things to Adam, and I'm like, we need to adapt this one. He's like, dude, they're the best. And like they've been the best since 2018, since they were probably one of the OGs in the whole wave of sports content and memes and sports culture and creating dope stuff. Their hype videos were dope. Like, I still have stuff saved from years ago. They are the gold standard if you want to learn and see what they do.
I know that as a Jaguars fan, yes, I know. I follow a handful of the people on Twitter who are involved with the social team, and they made the big mistake initially of they posted all these like affirmations when I was trending at the beginning of the season saying, like, we will not make fun of the social media team for how bad the team does. And I'm like, you literally just gave ammunition to the most psychotic fan base in all of pro sports, a team with fans that are literally all made up of the Joker. Like, they have nothing to lose and they've gone rogue. Which what would have been funnier for them to do is to embrace, like, all right, you clowns, ready to go to the game. Like, the more you acknowledge, like, if you acknowledge them, that's way better than if you try to ignore it or try to be like, oh, like, happy hour live with Jeff Lageman. And guess what? Ratio to death, fire, bulky, blah, blah, blah. Clowns. CBS broadcast. Everyone shows up to the Jaguars Colts game in clown costumes. The CBS camera literally dodging it like Neo from the Matrix. Like, we can't show any clowns on TV. Greg Gumbel and Adam Archuleta can never mention it, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, there's always like corporate, like, whatever, blah, blah, blah reasons of not mentioning it. But if I was a social media team, I would fully embrace that. I would just throw a little, are you clowns ready for the game Sunday? People aren't going to say it's slander. They're going to love it. They're going to thrive on it. They're going to know that you acknowledge them.
Absolutely.
And social media has real power. Or even, like, I'm sure you've seen like the Portland Pickles, right? Like that random minor league team, like the mascot. You already know what I'm talking about. There you go.
I saw that the same day as the PBR thing.
There you go.
It was just like, what is going on? Like, but that was, to be fair, that was a very weird day in sports because it happened. You know what? I think, I'm not going to lie to you, the Kodak Black incident is a perfect example. You know about the Kodak Black.
Yeah, of course.
That thing, dude, I wasn't working that night, but my phone was blowing up. And I'm like, what's going on? And I log on Twitter and the NHL is trending. Why is the NHL trending? Kodak Black was allegedly doing something. And it's just like, I work for the NHL. I understand why they didn't hop on that bandwagon. But if I was the Panthers social media team, I would have figured out some way to spin it, because that made hockey relevant, not just in sports, but across music and pop culture. Kodak Black is a pretty questionable guy, but like, it made it relevant. And the NHL was trending for a night for the funniest reason ever. It's probably one of the funniest social media moments of, like, I know we just got into 2022, but like, of the past 6 months, I don't remember something generating that much. And like, right after that, the Portland Pickles thing happened and people were like, what the hell's going on? It's amazing how teams are just, I mean, apart from the Kodak Black thing, because that's an anomaly, but like it was just like, it was also perfect timing right after that. And it's the most ridiculous thing. I remember sending it to my coworker that morning. I'm like, what is going on in sports right now? I don't understand this. Like, what's happening? What kind of universe do we live in?
And it's funny because I remember seeing some people through TSN tweet about like things that just barely scraped the surface of mentioning even the word Kodak. Like James Duffy tweeted, back in the day, like Kodak referred to taking a picture.
Yeah, I saw that one.
He didn't say anything else, but it's like, Florida doesn't have to say, okay, like we see you, getting twerked on. They could have just said something like, welcome. Like, for example, let's, I don't know who they're playing, but I assume that they won or whatever. Like, let's say,
I don't know. I don't remember.
I don't know.
I don't think anybody fucking cared who they were playing that
No,
night.
but
like, the result
like,
didn't matter.
is Barkov still on the team?
Yeah.
Okay, so that, like, let's say Barkov scored, it would have been like, showed a picture of him celebrating and say, Barkov, welcome to your Kodak moment. Like, that would have been hilarious. Because then you're not acknowledging like the heinous act, but like you kind of are, right? Like, you're generating, like, you're saying that I know what you know, but we're not, it's unspoken. Like, and that's the brilliant fine line. That's the balance.
But I think that this is the Kodak moment is a perfect example of how far can you go? How far can you really push that line? And like, I don't want to really speak for what I do for at my work, because I just don't want to speak beyond what I'm allowed to or whatever. I don't really know.
Understandable. Yeah.
But like from like a perspective of like, if I worked for the Panthers, like it takes a quick Google search to really understand Kodak Black and what he's done in the past. So it's like I'll give you an example. If it was like Justin Bieber or someone who doesn't necessarily have a record of any sort, then you can really go into it. You can really dig into a moment like that. But like, I also understand like Kodak, like there is, you know, it is very blurry line. It's a hilarious moment. You want to take advantage of it, but you really need to be careful about it. Do you know what I mean? Like you really need to pick your moments. But I think that's what I think the best social teams in sports and the best creative teams use. They do something hilarious at the best moment. Again, the Hurricanes are like a perfect example. They don't have any beef with Montreal, and then all of a sudden, Kotkaniemi's offer sheet, it goes out in French, and there's a $20 clause attached to the contract because there was a number 20 in the jersey or whatever the hell it was. Like, just finding the right moments and using them at the right time. Again, I wish that Barkov idea is hilarious. I wish I would have thought of that, but like, it's you gotta. That was a really fine line that they had. I think they had to walk on the proper side of it for obvious reasons.
I think it's just the inner meme artist in me trying to think of funny ways to take advantage of a crazy moment. Or even if they would have put like one of my favorite like Kodak memes is if they put the final score, let's say they won, just put them drive the boat.
Yeah, like just stuff like that. But again, I think under different circumstances, we would have seen teams and people do more. But you know, that was no one could have predicted that.
No,
like, no, you couldn't tell me.
Crazy.
You see Kodak sitting ringside. You don't think he's going to go upstairs? And there's no way he's going to do that.
At the same time, I think the benefit of that happening at a Florida game, like maybe Florida knew because like they're literally the least popular team in the NHL, or like Carolina.
I was gonna say
so unpopular.
For it to happen to any team, the best team it could have happened to was the Florida Panthers. You know what I mean? Like, no one gives a shit about hockey. Oh, like I shouldn't say that because they have Tampa Bay, but like it's not a popular market.
Not in Miami, really anyways.
Not in Miami, yeah, because that's a retirement community or some whatever their place the city is. Sunrise, but like it was Sunrise. Like, man, you don't know how many hockey fans that could have made. I don't know. A really good example of that was do you know of Tony X on Twitter?
Tony
X at Solu City. So he's this guy on Twitter who one day, this was like, I don't know how long ago, but I remember he blew up, and he was actually like, he's like kind of a hockey influencer now, and he's a really well-known name. Look him up later. But basically a couple of years ago, I think it was when St. Louis, it wasn't when they went to the Cup, but he's from St. Louis, and I guess he was watching a hockey game one day, and then he said he tweets out, "Man, white people been keeping hockey from us forever. This shit lit." It exploded. And like now he's a hockey influencer. They had him at the Winter Classic as a guest because he's a St. Louis fan. Like he has a tweet in the Hall of Fame. Like it's just one of those moments that you have no idea, but you got to capitalize on it, right? And like the Blues and the NHL did a really good job of getting this guy involved, and he's now a fan. But it's just like my point being is like that Kodak moment, you don't know who watched it, but they might be a hockey fan now when they weren't before. You know what I mean?
Why do they have a team in Arizona or in Florida or in Carolina? It's because the NHL hopes to God that somebody like an Austin Matthews, who was raised in Phoenix, ends up liking hockey someday, and they cash their check when he ends up playing in the NHL and bringing in fans. But in the same breath, when you get teams like Florida, like Carolina, or like the Los Angeles Chargers, who are constantly made fun of for having no fans, who have nothing to lose, and throw caution to the wind with their content, that's how they're going to engage the future generations. I've always thought that the Florida Panthers would be an interesting team to cheer for because of how much people say, oh, they have no fans and everyone loves making fun of the Classic. Look how many people there are 15 minutes before a puck drop. So, well, guess what? Now they're the center of attention with the whole Kodak Black thing, but that's eventually going to it just gets people talking. And then eventually
and that's all you need to do
to like the team.
It's like Duolingo. It's the same thing we were just talking about. Yeah. It's just, and like, I think with the Argos, and I can't speak too much onto what Adam's strategy is, but it's just like, yeah, we don't get fans at games because we're in downtown Toronto. Like, that's fine. Like, we know that it's because there's 3 other professional sports teams with a bigger market, TFC, the Leafs, and the Raptors. Like, okay, so we have the liberty to, we have the liberty to try different things. I want to stop here for a second. I have something I want to say, but I'm not sure if you can use it, but I'm going to say it anyways, and I'll check if you can use this quote, if that's okay.
Perfect.
But I remember when I was and I think this story should be fine, but I'll check with Adam first. But I think you might want to use it. When Adam asked me like, "Oh, come work for the Argos," like I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely. Like I would love to kind of shift over from the editing stuff and come shoot for you guys." And he's like, and I'm like, so when I did work for the Leafs, and I think this is another thing, but like when I did social media stuff for the Leafs last season during the playoffs, and I was doing social work for them every game night, social media work, everything needs to go be approved, obviously, to head office and to PR, just to make sure we're staying within the brand and not pushing the limit. And I remember like the first Argos thing I made, I sent to him and I'm like, "Yeah, let me know if it gets approved by head office." And he kind of laughs and he's just like, "We don't have to get anything approved with the Argos. We just post it. As long as it's not too outrageous." Like he's like, the Argos is a completely different entity from another team like the Leafs because of just, I think one, obviously it's a smaller team and the market's different, but they also know at the head office, it's like, we got to promote the game. We got to get people in seats more than the other teams. So they're more willing to step outside that box and just throw caution to the wind. Like I made a hype video, and it was posted in 5 seconds. You know what I mean? Like normally that would have had to go through a couple hoops, making sure certain players run in or certain players run in, blah, 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 blah. Like with the Argos, it was just like, yeah, let's just do it. Let's throw it up. Like whatever. If there's something, we'll apologize for it later. So to kind of cut back, I'll make sure you can use that story because I think it's a really good example of like me literally experiencing that, but I'll let you know.
Of course, yeah. And you always want to make sure to like we're told in school, CYA, cover your ass.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something I learned that was really relevant is, especially in content and working, it's like sometimes you got to just shoot your shot and apologize later. Like sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission.
Yeah.
In sports, like sometimes I would rather just do something. And that's something school taught me. Like I remember I was doing a project and I was like, I don't think we can do this. I don't think we're allowed to do something like this for this show we were producing. And someone just said, "You know what?" One of my mentors was like, "Just do it. If you mess up, ask, like beg for forgiveness. But if you ask permission, they're gonna say no to you." So like sometimes if you wanted a good way of like, I wouldn't, again, riskiness, taking a risk to a moderate. It's purely situational. But like sometimes the best thing to do is just to do it, because once people see results, they're less inclined to be like, we shouldn't do this, right? So that's another tip that I think I would throw in there.
That's a perfect example. I was gonna say, because it's like, well, if it blows up and everyone loves it, then I can't really get that upset, right? Like if you know, if it's positive, there's a positive spin on it, then why not? Like obviously if it creates hate, then no, you don't want that. But like if you take a risk and people love it, or they love the meme content, and it's like, well, then like it's what the people want. So
yeah,
maybe it's okay to roll with it.
You can't tell me Duolingo wasn't a little hesitant to like start with that, but then when they saw it work, they're like, "All right, let's keep going." You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, they're like, "Here you go. Here's
a case study."
They
exactly
said to the girl who does it, like, "Here's the keys. You can go crazy. Like, do whatever you want. As long as we don't get a lawsuit, or it's not a lawsuit, we can't win. Like, I don't care. Like, go for it." And
yeah, exactly.
It works. They're probably one of the most hilarious, or even, I mean, you're within my age range, and you have lived in Canada for a long time. Do you ever remember the show that used to go on Treehouse? It was a Canadian children's television channel. It was called Max and Ruby. You ever remember that?
Yes, I remember that show.
I have had Max and Ruby videos pop up on my page on TikTok with trends, and it is crazy. Every top comment on every video is in all caps. "Yo, who runs this account?" Because people are shocked that a former nostalgic element of their childhood is now at the forefront of TikTok trends, even like 20 years after its relevance. Insane. But guess what? It makes people remember those core memories in such a fond way, because they're now taking risks in the present day and connecting with that audience still all these years later. It's the reason why everyone loves and remembers the first 3 seasons of SpongeBob, because of how much meme content. It's literally an extreme goldmine for memes. Because it's like SpongeBob is like, there'll never be a show ever again or ever was or ever will be like SpongeBob. The way they can connect with the
Yes,
millennial
iconic.
audience is better than like The Simpsons or Family Guy or whatever. Like it transcends time with its relevance of all the meme possibilities and everything. And that's why
Yeah.
people love sharing it. It's a kid's show, but it's more than that. It connects with the audience, and that's what you need in content.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree. Like my first meme idea, if I ever got to think of a meme for like when I was at Bar Down, SpongeBob. What SpongeBob moment can I put in here? Like whatever it is. But like you're absolutely right. Like it's even like I don't know if you remember a few months ago, like Blue's Clues became relevant again because it was on TikTok and all of the guys are back and it was the anniversary. Nickelodeon took advantage of the right moment and it's all over the internet again. So like
Steve's
I remember
return to like so
we
much
did
nostalgia.
an Argos meme with Blue's Clues. It was like and look where we started and look where how far you are now when we were last and now in 2019 we were last and now in 2021 we're in first. It was like it's amazing. I think that's TikTok's huge for that, but like the internet is like so key for that. But like TikTok's revolutionized all of that because it's so easy to like it just pops up on your For You page and you're like, whoa, where is this coming from?
Yeah, man, it's crazy. And honestly, I feel like the way that people think in terms of their comedy and their humor, TikTok was literally the app made to bring it forth. Like
Absolutely.
it's so successful for that very reason. So Juan, we are getting towards the end of our time in today's episode. So I want to ask some quick wrap-up questions to have a little bit more fun before I part for today.
Let's do it.
What is your favorite childhood sports memory?
Like that I played in or that I saw on TV?
Saw on TV, like as a fan.
I mean, it has to be the golden goal. Like I was in elementary school, like even like the 2014 Olympics. Like I was in high school. I still like 2010. Like that was by far by far my favorite childhood like sporting moment. Absolutely. There's another one that wasn't necessarily a child. I was still a teenager. 2014 World Cup. I don't know if you're a big soccer guy. James Rodriguez scored a bit of a wonder goal. I think that being Colombian. Uruguay, yeah, bumps it off his chest and volleys, and it's nuts. I remember losing my mind. Those two are definitely like permanently etched in my mind. Like I remember. I don't have to see the clip. I know what happens like verbatim. So though one of those two would definitely be my number one like childhood sport memory.
What is your favorite sports movie?
It's a really good question. I recently, during the pandemic, I watched Moneyball, and that was good. I'm not a baseball guy at all. I don't watch baseball. I don't follow baseball. It's just not my sport. That movie was awesome. I like the acting is great. The story was amazing. It wouldn't say it's my favorite, but it's the most recent one I've ever seen. Blindside is also really good. It's a classic. Blindside is always a good movie. If I can chuck a documentary in, The Last Dance doc, if you watch it as a whole, it's basically a movie. And it was obviously recent, but like the storytelling in that is iconic, and you really got to see Michael Jordan for who he is. I thought it was great.
Have you been stalking me by any chance? Because those are literally like two of the three most recent things I've ever seen. I swear. Like I drove from Winnipeg all the way to Toronto with my girlfriend, and we stopped in Thunder Bay. And the first thing she pulls up, she was just searching through Netflix, like what thing would he like? Because I love sports. She puts on Moneyball. What were the chances? I was like, I've never seen this, but you know what? I'll be curious to watch it.
It was a great movie, man. Like I would watch it again, and it's iconic. It's a fantastic movie.
And I'm not like you. I'm not even a baseball fan. Like baseball's so low on my radar, and I loved it.
But
it was amazing.
I think it's also because we work in the media sphere, like in the content kind of situation. Like even though you do a podcast, like I love watching stuff. I don't care if I'm not a fan of it. Like I just love consuming content. And like, yeah, I'm not a baseball guy, but I love visual stuff. I love a good movie. I love film. Like, so I think it's just mixing and matching things you're passionate about. And sometimes they intersect with things you never would have thought you liked.
And even The Last Dance, like it's so good, like great content for memes and just so compelling. Like to me, like I know that Michael Jordan, like the whole Michael Jordan is like not even just he transcends basketball. He's literally a culture icon. Like
yeah,
one of the most iconic pop culture figures. ever.
Yeah.
Like he literally is
Sports,
associated with basketball,
shoes,
right?
like Gatorade, meme culture. My favorite meme for the longest time has been and I took that personally. I love that meme. I just love taking, like, I remember I did an Argos one with the art, like like I made one and posted on my Twitter. I think it was like one of the other teams copied something we did, and it was just like the Argos content team, Michael Jordan, and I took that personally. Like, I love it. It's amazing.
Like, how is it possible for us to be like it's literally like right now a meme that describes this podcast is Spider-Man pointing at himself. Like we say like the like, and I took that personally. Like, oh man, there's every single time that my brothers and I will joke with each other about certain scenarios and stories in our life, we'll always allude it to memes. And I'll always go and post on my Instagram story, like a clip from South Park or a clip from The Last Dance, where he's like, Brian Russell, and he goes, I went back, I know he's talking about going back, and he's like, that's all I needed for him to say that. And it became personal with me. I love that. Even though it is a bit of like a Mandela effect, he never actually said, and I took that personally.
Oh, he didn't.
No,
he did.
I went back and I watched
say?
the whole thing. I was like, where did he say it? And I realized people just took the screen cap of him putting his hands out and then just said, I took that personally because of how
I thought
personally
he
took
say.
things. He doesn't actually say
I thought
it.
he did.
Nope. Look
wow.
Up, go back and watch the whole thing. What he actually says is, you know, and it became personal with me. Like when he talks about
wow.
He's like, I was at the restaurant and I see Carl, like when he saw,
wow.
Oh my God. Why am I forgetting his last, George Carl. That's his name. Like so he sees him and then he doesn't say hi to him. And he's like, that's all I needed for him to do that. And it became personal with me. Like that's the only actual time when he said it became personal with me. He didn't actually say it specifically. And I took that personally, even though the meme is still great. It still holds up, but just a little tidbit there, you know.
I actually had no idea. Next time someone uses that, that's going to be like my fun fact. If someone, I'm like, he didn't actually say that. All right, good to know. Okay.
So it's honestly, that's one of that's a clickbait thing I found years ago, but like, you know, things that we misremember. Like I'm sure, have you seen The Matrix, or you at least know about The Matrix, right?
Yeah.
Do you know the meme where Lawrence Fishburne says, what if I told you that everything you've been told is a lie?
Yeah, I know that one.
That's also not a line in the movie. He never said that at all. And people just misremembered it. They like, the reason why it's called the Mandela effect is because people
thought Nelson Mandela was in prison or something along those lines.
They thought he died in prison in the 80s.
Oh, they thought he died in prison. Yeah,
like he went to prison, but people thought he died in prison. I even thought Nelson Mandela, whenever I saw pictures of him as a kid, I thought that it was because he had passed away or something. Then I realized, like, oh, he was in prison. And then he was released. Like, so it's just the classic misremembering or misquoting, like, and then he just snowballs like the whole. Darth Vader doesn't say, "Luke, I'm your father." He says, "No, I'm your father." But people would say Luke just to create the context. Like, you know, it's like the little things. But like, the Michael Jordan, like, it's a great meme, but technically, it's not the exact line, which is. It's interesting.
Good to know. I'm gonna put that in my back pocket of fun facts to use next time I go to a party or something.
Yeah, exactly. My final question for you, Juan, is if you could choose one athlete from anywhere in the world, anytime, dead or alive, to sit down and do a feature. You have all the time in the world, no rush, no press or sprinting in to steal them away. Who would you sit down and do a feature with, and what would you want to ask them about? Any athlete, anytime, any country. Doesn't even have to be North America. Could be how.
You know what? Like,
doesn't matter.
Damn, that's a really good question. It's kind of like the one where, like, who would you have dinner with, dead or alive, kind of thing. It's like kind of same kind of idea. You know what? And like, this is a bit of a biased answer, but like, I don't care. Like, so Carey Price, I'm a Habs fan. Carey Price is my favorite athlete of all time. Obviously, I grew up watching the Canadians, and he's my favorite athlete of all time, bar none. And I know obviously he went through stuff this year with mental health and things where he hasn't played. But I just think, you know, he's such a reserved guy and such a calm human, and doesn't really open up much. Nor do I ever expect him to change, and nor should anyone be forced to open up. But I just think like his story is so intriguing with, you know, being this highly touted prospect. I don't know how familiar you are with him, but being a fifth overall pick as a goalie to the most historic hockey team of all time, with some of the greatest goaltenders of all time, and he goes through that high, and then he starts playing, and he goes through these lows of like he can't compete and it's too much for him, and there's just so many roller coasters from that to becoming one of the greatest goalies in the league at the time, winning the MVP and the best best goalie award, breaking the Canadians all time. He's one of the best goalies of all time now, and now just to see him go from a Stanley Cup final to not playing at all because he's taking care of his mental health is such an interesting kind of tale along. And to add to that, he's also First Nations, and he has such a love and respect for that. He's like he was born in a First Nations family, so there's just so many interesting things, and he's such an interesting human. And if you can play goaltender for the Montreal Canadiens, which is arguably the hardest position in sports, in one of the most hostile sport environments in the world, like first of all, there must be something wrong with you, because like you can just stand there and take it all and still perform at an elite level. But like it just takes a certain kind of human to go through all these obstacles and come out on top. And even when you're at the top, be thrown off the mountain and still want to climb back up the mountain. You know what I mean? Like there's just something about that. And apart from him being my favorite athlete, but I think that's why he's my favorite athlete, not because he's a great goaltender, but because he's gone through adversity, climbed up, was at the peak of the mountain, got shoved off, is trying to dust himself off to climb back up, even though he was probably at his worst point and it wasn't even hockey related. He's still trying to get back up. So I would love to just sit down and like be like, man, what's up? What's going on in here? And like in my fourth year of university for my thesis, I did a sports documentary for my thesis on the psychology of sport athletes and what goes on in here. And we talked to so many athletes about injury recovery, about just how you perform in big moments, how you handle the pressure. But like, because we always talk about like, you know, they're natural athletes and whatever, we never really say like, what are you thinking about? What's actually going on in your mind? And I would love to one day revive that idea with someone like him and be like, dude, like you're crazy in a good way. Like, how did you do all this? How did you survive mentally through all of this heckling and praise and accolades and all these things? Like, it's just, he has an incredible story that I don't think people really look deep enough into, but he's the one person who I would love to sit down and try to get him to open up about.
Man, when you describe the journey that Carey Price has gone through, those are the things that really make a remarkable athlete. Like, yeah, when you're in the NHL, like everyone's got to be really good. Like you're a professional hockey player, man. Like that's basically the best league in the world. But to go through all those things on top of having to compete and be treated as a commodity because you're a professional athlete, that's just worth wins and losses and millions of dollars. Like that's so hard and so mentally daunting. And it would be amazing to sit down and like know what really goes on behind the scenes with him.
And I think like just this year alone, like with his struggles with mental health and opening up about it, which is so rare in sports nowadays, because even though, yeah, like mental health is such a big part of society nowadays, like people are still afraid to open up about it, especially professional athletes, because you're held to the status of being a god to a degree, especially in a city like Montreal with the Canadians. That's like being like the being starting quarterback with the Winnipeg Bombers in fucking Winnipeg. Like you are the pinnacle of a human being in this city. And he says, I cannot play this year because I'm dealing with stuff that is bigger than hockey. That doesn't just make you an amazing athlete. It makes you such a strong human. And like, that's the thing, these people, these athletes, no matter who you could do the same story on any athlete and the adversity that they've gone through. Like any Sidney Crosby going through those concussions years ago and probably never being able to play hockey again, but then comes back and wins 2 more cups. Like, there's a human element to this of resilience and strength that people don't look at very frequently.
Yeah, man, it's totally amazing to like just think about how many more stories there are out there and remarkable things that have yet to come to the surface of the struggles people go through and the adversity that they've overcome to achieve what they have as professional athletes. And even for people as university athletes, I've connected with a handful of people who have done features on those that, you know, went to Ryerson, went to other universities, and finally did one myself before I left for Toronto. It's just like, whether it's funny or whether it's serious, like it's just, I mean, we're both people that love telling stories. So it's amazing to get to know more about getting to look behind the scenes is what makes things interesting. That's why people love behind the scenes, day in the life, TikToks, because you want to see what really goes on. When you see the polished, pretty picture, it looks great. But when you get to see what's really going on, it gives you a hard dose of reality in a good way, and sometimes in a not so good way, but in an important way.
And I think just something I want to add on to, like, for people listening, like, especially if you found this through me or or whatever. Like the biggest thing I could say to anybody who wants to tell stories in this industry is they're right in your backyard. If go shoot your high school football team and talk to their players and see who has an interest in it. Talk about that. Go to your local university, go to your local, like whatever. Like for me, I didn't really get to talk about this, and this is a whole other talk. We could talk another fucking hour about this, but like working, like I can't believe I didn't mention this. I'm so mad at myself that the biggest reason I would still do the university experience is because I owe everything to the Ryerson Rams for giving me an opportunity to pick up a camera. I'm so mad I didn't say this before, but like, if it wasn't for them giving me the shot, if it wasn't for them me emailing, I remember emailing my then boss saying, I want to work with you guys, even if it's for free. And that got me my start. I got free reign to do whatever I want. But like, you kind of just said it now, like, and this is why I thought about this. And again, I can't believe I mentioned it before, but like OUA athletes, like I have such a strong emotional tie to Ryerson and to the OUA because I worked 3 years and I'm still to a degree working with the women's basketball team. I love Canadian university sports. I have such a passion for those athletes, and not just because I got to shoot them. A lot of them are my friends. I have so many friends right now, and it's incredibly relevant right now with the Ontario government and the OUA not being able to play because of the restrictions. And there's so many incredible people with so many amazing stories that I've had the pleasure of telling, and that I would love to keep telling. But like I said, like. If you're out there and you want to tell stories, it happens. It's right in your backyard. If you're in university, go shoot your university athletes. If you're in high school, go shoot your high school athletes. If you're not in school, go volunteer for your local AAA hockey team or local football team. Go do it, because those stories are honestly some of my favorite pieces are still with Ryerson. And I know I work with the NHL and I work with the KSN MLSE, and those are all great highlights. Some of my favorite all-time pieces, some of my favorite stories and moments come with those OUA athletes, come with those Ryerson athletes, who I am so lucky to call a lot of them my friends as well, and they're awesome. And yeah, like it's so easy to find those stories. You just have to be willing to get out of the house and look for them.
That's a great point, man. And I know like there's going to be like 1,000 things afterwards, and we realize, oh, we didn't talk about this, or oh, we didn't talk about that. And unfortunately,
yeah, I'm so mad I was thinking about that, because that was such a pivotal moment. I mean, if you want to cut it into there, but like, yeah, no, like. And if you're a Ryerson Ram listening to this, like, shout out to you guys. I fucking love all of you guys. Like, I wouldn't be there with them if it wasn't for them. Like, and it's a really emotional thing for me, because it's just I hold those people to such a standard because they're great people, and they let me stick a camera in their face for 4 years. So, you know, not really easy to do. Trust me, you don't like getting cameras in your face. Not the next person.
It didn't seem like some Argos players like getting cameras in their face, but that's a story for a different time.
Yeah, that is a different story for a different time.
But it's all good because we're having fun. At the end of the day, you know, staying local with telling stories can be such an unbelievably rewarding experience. And like you mentioned with Ryerson, that's where I've seen a lot of your work, and that's where a lot of people have seen your work. The NHL is just the tip of the iceberg, right? For a long career. But when you get those local stories, it's, yeah, you can make the money. You can go talk to Austin Matthews and the Connor McDavid's. That's amazing. But like, to get to talk to those people that are going to be overlooked 9 times out of 10 because they're not getting money or because they're not in the NBA, sometimes that's where the best stories are at. So never, ever, for those scenarios, do not ever underestimate stories that are in your backyard, especially university athletes across the entire country.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I 100% agree.
And with that, Juan, I want to thank you for having me on today's episode. It was super awesome to get to finally sit down, chat with you, get to know a little bit more about yourself, about the work you do, have some fun talking about the relevance of memes, Ryerson's impact on your career, creative content, the whole bit. It's amazing. And I feel like you're just like one of those, like, you know, distant friends or cousins you've met once in a while, and you finally see them and get to sit down and be like, oh yeah, we get to talk again. Like, that's the power of storytelling though. And that's why I love doing what I do. And that's why I'm appreciative that people like yourself get to come on and join me. So I really appreciate you being on, man. It was awesome.
No, thank you for having me. Like, this is, like you said, it's like, I feel like I know you, and I just started talking to you today. So like, no, yeah, I appreciate you having me on and listening to me ramble. And I think you got something really good going on here. So like, keep it going, man. Like, this kind of stuff, like this kind of stuff right now you're doing is exactly what we're talking about, meeting with the athletes. I don't really ever get to talk about what I do. I like to a degree. I have my own YouTube channel, but that's just me sticking a camera in my bedroom and talking. But like, I really appreciate you doing this, and I guarantee you, everybody that you've interviewed does it too, especially people who work in the industry, because we're not really noticed. We're just working behind the scenes, doing what you should be doing. So I'm really appreciative of you inviting me on and asking me about me, because I don't get to tell this often. So thank you. I had a blast.
And thank you to the listener for enjoying today's episode with NHL social media video creative, Juan Morales.